Are you a scaling SaaS founder?
Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
This one thing has been my secret weapon to scale up fast and create more than $260 million in ARR. You want in? Maybe growing at lightning speed seems like a pipe dream, but think again. Strategic partnerships are not just an option. They are rocket fuel to scaling fast and furious. This elusive strategy called strategic partnerships are collaborations where two or more businesses align their resources, their strengths, and their market reach to fuel mutual growth. And the alliances are particularly crucial for SaaS companies looking to scale quickly, offer a pathway to enhance product offerings, and enter new markets, as well as increase brand credibility, all while keeping cash burn low. And that's what we all want, right? Yet the road to forming successful strategic partnerships isn't without its bumps. People talk about this all the time, but getting it to work well, that's a different story. As leaders, we always grapple with challenges. And in the early stages, the big ones are things like limited resources, slow market penetration, and moving from obscurity to becoming well-known. Aligning with the right partners who share a common vision and market goals accelerates that. But the key challenge, building partnerships that are actually truly strategic and mutually beneficial instead of just merely transactional or paper that nobody pays attention to and never accomplishes anything. But most companies struggle with identifying partners, reaching out, and making it attractive. Then the real work begins, and that is turning that into mutual revenue. We use a process called a partner network navigator that takes clients from 0 prospective partners, or maybe a few, to 100 in about 30 minutes, and no AI needed for that one. And then the scripts, agreements, marketing assets, joint promotion to make it all work. Here it is at a high level. How do we do that? Well, first, we want to make sure that we're attracting the right partners. So to do that, begin by identifying companies who have the same target audience and sell a complementary product or service. Number one is to attract the right partners. Begin by identifying companies who have the same target audience and sell a complementary product or service. Then we want to take that list and we want to filter out potential partners. We want to filter it for potential partners who align with your business goals and values. And between those, values is the most important filter. Bad match there is the number 2 reason partnerships fail. Using that list, do targeted outreach to attract those key players. The goal is to create a compelling value proposition that is irresistible to potential partners. Second is convert interest into action. Once you've attracted potential partners, the next step is to convert the interest into a concrete partnership. And that means it's revenue producing. So we want to negotiate terms that foster long-term success and mutual benefits. Focus on clear communication of expectations, shared goals, and how each party's strengths complement each other. And it has to be a win for both of you. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And third is we want to activate and leverage the partnership. This one kills me. I'd say 80% of partnerships never produce anything except paperwork. Let's not do that. Cool? With the partnership sealed, activate it by integrating your systems, processes, and teams where necessary. It has to have executive support, collaborative marketing efforts, joint sales strategies, shared customer service platforms. All of those can enhance the partnership's effectiveness. There are 100 ways to do this, and both companies have to absolutely be committed and on board. Otherwise, nothing happens. A company that did this extremely well is Zapier. By strategically partnering with hundreds of software companies, they not only expanded their service offerings, but also embedded their product into countless workflows. And that led to exponential growth. We talk about, just do a zap. It has become part of the terminology. But those partnerships have allowed them to rapidly scale, leveraging their partners' user bases and market credibility. And now the tables have turned. People want to leverage them for that. So leveraging strategic partnerships offers a powerful avenue for SaaS companies to accelerate growth without the hefty price tag of going it alone. Partners can come from unexpected places. In my current SaaS company, my best partner prospects were my competitors just a few months before I started this company. I exited a company competing against them, launched this one, and then partnered with my former adversaries. Crazy sounds like, but it works. But remember, the key to success lies in choosing partners wisely, aligning those strategic objectives, and meticulously planning the collaboration to ensure that you both win. And when it's done right, strategic partnerships aren't just about growing fast, they're about growing smart. What partnership tips do you have? Drop it in the comments below. For more on partnerships, check out my first book, Small Fish, Big Pond, Building a World-Class Business That Swims Circles Around Competitors. There is a chapter and a process specifically devoted to partnerships in the book itself. Small Fish, Big Pond also delivers powerful marketing and leadership lessons guaranteed to enhance your marketing, wrap value around your clients, and guide their buying journey to conclude that your company is the only solution for them. It includes step-by-step frameworks and time-tested growth principles to attract ideal clients, convert them, and then transform them into your brand ambassadors. Pick up the print, ebook, or audio today at smallfishbigpond.com or Amazon. And remember, all book profits go to charity all the time. Our founder on Tuesday was Jason Radisson, CEO of Movo, a human capital management platform that is transforming how companies hire, engage, and retain frontline workers, particularly remote workers. We talked about employee engagement, culture, leadership, and how he built multiple unicorn SaaS companies, including Uber, 99 Taxis. And our expert guest last week was Janie Smith, author of Creating Competitive Advantage and Relevant Selling. We talked about how to harness your unique strengths and thrive in competitive markets. And my big aha moment when we were talking was how often what we think is a competitive advantage is way different than what our clients actually value. You in that boat? Hundreds of other companies didn't think so either. And it was a great episode, great insights there. If you missed either one, go back and give them a listen. My guest today is Barrett King, Senior Director of Revenue at New Breed Revenue, HubSpot's top solutions partner. Barrett has a decade of expertise in forging strategic partnerships and driving go-to-market strategies specifically for SaaS companies. His knack for cultivating new business opportunities has consistently surpassed sales targets and fueled revenue growth. Barrett excels in boosting customer engagement and retention, all while delivering exceptional experiences. Welcome, someone who builds lasting, profitable relationships, Barrett King. Hey, Barrett, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. I'm excited for our conversation.
Well, you have a fascinating background. Tell us a little bit about that and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I do have a different sort of path that I took to get to where I'm at.
Yeah.
I have a design degree. I graduated at a time when the economy had sort of tanked. And so I found my way directly after college into restaurants and did that for a few years, but ultimately wanted to get into tech. I really like technology and SaaS in particular, and just sort of, I think, the intersection between people and tools, people and computers. So I found my way into a startup that was fairly mature at the time, did quite well for about 14 months or so. And then the housing crash of 2010 happened and they lost funding and I got laid off, back into restaurants, and then finally got out of restaurants full time back in, this has got to be like 2000, maybe 12 or so, 13. And was fortunate to be a part of a Google-backed early stage startup and see what the evolution of early company stages actually was like, and learn a lot about go-to-market strategy and how to build product for scale and how to listen to your customers, and a really great experience. And I think a lot about this journey when folks ask me as building sort of like my Lego mat, right? So the analogy I use is like that green Lego mat that we all got when we were kids, right? We built our house or whatever we were going to, build on. I think about that as leaving primary education. And some folks have on top of their mats, a little micro tower, a little, 3 stack of blue 6x6 blocks. And that's the folks that knew what they were going to do when they graduated college. They want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a marketer, right? I didn't. Like I still, wake up some days and say, what do I want to do with my life? Because I find problems and I solve them. I get excited about challenges and I like working with people. So my career has been, taking a series of opportunities and building Lego blocks onto my mat. And then it was around 2014 14, 15, I started to figure out I had an opportunity to take those Legos and reorganize them and be more intentional. And so I left that startup as we exited, went over to HubSpot and spent 8.5 years there in partnerships, in sales leadership. I ran sales training at one point, and I did a bunch of different things across the organization as they grew from about 400 employees when I joined to over 8,000 when I left. And that journey was fascinating because I added more and more Lego bricks to my mat, and I organized them into this like sort of, it's almost like a tower, like a pyramid almost, a temple, if you will, where it's not pointed at the top. I can still stand on it, but it's this base that I've learned to develop my skills and my attributes and the things that I'm best at on top of. And so my career has been interesting because it wasn't until, like I said, around 15, 16, perhaps even, that I started to figure out I could craft this conversation and build these skills into what I wanted. And then about 8 months ago or so, I decided it was time to leave the SaaS part of this industry, the actual, technology itself. So I left HubSpot and I went to the top partner in the ecosystem. I wanted to understand and learn more about how businesses are actually helping those customers to get value from the technology and how they actually grow using a tool, right? So, so much of my career had been spent helping folks use the technology that is HubSpot, right? The tech stack
Yeah.
to sell the customers. Now is a chance to actually work with those customers and help them use it to that, to the effect they're looking for. So it's been a great journey. I'm head of revenue here, so director of revenue, and I focus on really delivering outsized returns. We try and impact the way customers grow and help them grow better over the course of their time using the tools and our services to do so. So it's a really nice sort of progression in terms of my story. I've been fortunate to do a bunch of different things that give me perspective on this whole B2B SaaS industry, and it's been a really great journey.
I love that. And having both sides, sales, marketing, training, really, building on all of those. I think the concept of go-to-market is pretty broad, but it's also evolved quite a bit over time. You mentioned partnerships. What role do partnerships play in this evolving landscape?
Yeah, I think it's interesting if you look at the bigger picture. So a lot of folks talk about go-to-market and they sort of analogize this idea that if you look at like the 80s and early 90s, it was sales-led growth. You had salespeople and you had people out in, the market itself, and they were the evangelists and they were curating your brand message and they were selling your product or solution. Now, that's not to say that marketing wasn't present, but as digital marketing evolved in the really like early 2000s, you saw maybe mid to late 90s, early 2000s, when technology became sort of the go-to-market path for marketers. Now marketing, and really inbound, which is what HubSpot coined, became the path to market because it was about even earlier engagement with your prospective customers and being very intentional around curating a message and content and assets and a storyline to help those customers answer their questions even before they engage with sales, before they really want to learn, what it costs to get started. If you take that journey and you sort of look at the bigger picture, it's always been about building trust. It's always been about building value in for the customer before they actually work with you and your brand, your company, et cetera. So there was this natural progression that started to take place in the earlier kind of mid 2000s. So call it like 2010, whatever we would call that on paper, 2010 to 2015, where businesses, SaaS companies in particular, started to identify that there were other businesses, naturally so, that were in close proximity to the work that they were doing for their customers. And in many cases, those businesses were proper partners, if you will, in that they figured out how to take the software, the services, whatever it is that company was delivering on, and add more value, right? Do something more effectively or use that tool to be more impactful to the customer base. Fast forward to today, partnerships are the next evolution in terms of go-to-market. Like I don't think there's any B2B SaaS leader, any technology leader, I mean, even manufacturing leader that isn't thinking about all of the companies that sit around their customer and how to work with them. Because, right, as I said before, it's about trust, right? And so if you look at who has your customers' trust before you do, it's the partners. It's the ones that are already delivering value and already helping them. So long story short, bit of a narrative there, if you will. But, I think what you're seeing more important than ever is that people, marketing is table stakes. People understand that marketing is going to happen and they're going to absorb it and listen to it. And that's sort of their education. Sales is a natural part of that process because they're ultimately going to need to buy from somebody, PLG aside, like there's people involved. It's the bigger conversation, which is, and how do I get value from this investment? That partnerships really help to wrap a bow around marketing, selling, and servicing alongside you to deliver real value to your customer. And that's the new, really strongest path to go market right now.
What makes a great partner? How would you know, if this is going to be a good partnership, or maybe it's something that is not a great fit?
It's a good question. I think a core part of what partnerships entails is proximity. How close are they to your customer? How close are they to you and your go to market? So,
Yeah.
like, whenever I talk to somebody that we're partnered with, a leader at that company, whatever it is, the first question I usually ask is, what are your priorities? What are you focused on? What are your gaps? What are your issues, challenges, opportunities? Partnership should be a two-way street. The best partners are the ones that understand we are going to do this together. So it's actually interesting because if you talk to B2B leaders, especially sales leaders right now, they'll say, I love partnerships. They help us generate revenue. And you're like, cool, but then what? They're like, nah, it's great. They help us sell more deals. And you're like, yeah, but then what? There's the 2.0 of this, the second half of the story, which is, and they retain your customers better and they expand those customers. Those customers are happier. They're deeper in your tools, or they're using more of your services. So I think if you look at the best partnerships, it is an aligned go to market. And buzzwords aside, it is two businesses made up of two people, if you will, that just want the same thing. So why not do it in concert? Because there's that age old statement of like, 1+1 = 3. If you really get this right, your mutual customer benefits, which, rising tides lifts all ships. I'm an analogies guy, so let's go for it. Like you're going
Yeah.
to see more value, and it works that way.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I've seen over time is companies really buy into the idea of partnerships.
Yeah.
And it does have to be a two-way street. But the idea as they go into it is, I want to find other people to sell my stuff. and partnerships just don't work that way. What have you seen, and how have you seen that play out and also be resolved?
I think that's changing. So I actually think if you go back 5 or 10 years, really 10 years, that was the partnerships go to market path. Like you found businesses that would sell your software or services, whatever, right? I think what has specifically happened, I know I experienced it while at HubSpot. I see it now as a top partner.
I'm sure.
Right? Like the narrative changed because customers changed. So I think when you specifically look at the market, the leading indicators of success have always been, sort of put the ball where it's going to be, where the customer is going to be, which is playing to your strengths in terms of knowing the path to market. And partnerships ultimately end up becoming a part of that because your customers demand it. Now the shift is customers, look for the answer to a question, marketing. They engage with somebody to explore that more deeply, sales. But then what happens after they buy became the narrative of, I think in many ways driven by the pandemic, but the last like 3 to 5 years. So because customers became more discerning about price, more intentional around where they spend their time, and because technology was forced into everyone's faces, because we're so distributed now as a workforce and because people are buying more rapidly and there's more scrutiny around it, partnerships had to go from just a sales engine that also kind of sort of serviced, right? Loose language intentionally, to partnerships are a collective, collaborative go-to-market that's going to help us, yes, to sell more, but let's be clear, they are retaining our customers better because they're closer to the problem. They are expanding that customer use of the platform or service because they are closer to the problem. So it's a proximity-based result now, in that partnerships, as a general statement, in my opinion, and my experience, frankly, are moving further away from just point of sale. Even like the distributors and resellers you see are exploring deeper relationships because client value, right? Client value is the metric success now in the industry. And I think, bit of a soapbox, so forgive me, push me off this if it's too much, but like,
no, jump up there. I love it.
I think it's driven by PE. I think it's driven by, the VCs that for the so many years, the decades before, Andreessen and, the big ones, and then the smalls, right? Stage 2 and otherwise, they always said it was in many ways growth at all costs. You just got to sell, sell, sell. Hire people, sell more, right? Sell through the problem. Every, VC interaction I ever had in startup space that I used to, be a part of, and then myself as a VC, as an investor, I always looked at and how happy and healthy are the customers. I always thought like this is kind of a missed opportunity. And you saw that change about 5 to 7 years ago, where it was actually about, yes, it was LTV to CAC, but really it was about the lifetime value as a core metric in terms of customer retention and expansion. And that told you the health of the business, not the accelerated growth, but the actual health. Partnerships are a core part of that because no company can hire through that problem. You can't hire enough services people and enough implementation folks that are deeply integrated into your customer base and know the market and touching the problem every day to scale an organization effectively. So then partnerships becomes, that evolution that we're seeing.
And then the customers are part of that ecosystem. And I think it makes all of those solutions stickier as well. and that they really see the value that they're getting across the spectrum. It's not just one thing or one thing in the middle, but there's a continuum of value that spans more than just a single organization.
Yeah, it's the value chain. It's the value triangle, I've heard it called.
Yeah.
Like this idea that you bring a solution into the dynamic of someone who understands the technology deeply. That's your your SaaS business. Somebody who understands the problem deeply. That's your partner. And somebody who can benefit from the technology and the solution of that problem when they come together. And that's the component that you start to develop, the cycle you start to develop, where the customer doesn't sit in the middle. You always hear folks talk about, well, the customers are the center of everything we do. I actually disagree. The technology and the customer and the partner are the three sides of your triangle. At the center of that is the problem or opportunity you're actually solving for. And when you bring those three together and they're aligned, this is the problem. This is the opportunity. We are trying to solve it. We are going to lean in. You bring the tool, you bring the expert, you bring the customer together, then you actually get lift across those organizations, to your point.
And when you have the problem in the middle, you're always having conversations with the customer, and more personalized conversations. As time has gone on, and they're expecting that, and we want to deliver that. Whether it is through one-on-one interaction, AI has some impact on that now. What are you seeing as far as genuine personalization and having those conversations around the problem that's very personalized to the end customer?
It used to be, it's a smart question. It used to be about marketing, educating on what I would describe as like level 1, level 2 pain, like the early observation, and then maybe like the slightly deeper integrated, approachable part of the problem. The integrated solution, the thing that actually gets to the end result, requires education. And so I think what you're seeing more than anything right now is a shift away from personalization at scale. And that's going to still be present. Like you have to say, yes, we have smart tokens that like put your name on an email and maybe like your company.
Right.
And like that stuff is just table stakes. Go a layer deeper and you say it's going to capture a recent conversion. Like I think AI will drive potentially an accelerated sort of renaissance of the way that sales and marketing talk to the customer, because those systems, when they're integrated with LLMs and the brain power behind that, can actually speak to a buyer at scale faster. So if you think about like the shift that you've seen in outreach, right? For years it was out in the streets selling, and then it was marketing and inbound marketing and attract your customer. And now, while those two engines are still running, your salespeople have to go to market again, right? Like they have to actually go out there and engage, which means they have to know the problem. They have to pivot on the problem as it evolves. They have to be. So I do think there's an opportunity where you'll see this accelerated value in terms of frontline team member education and empowerment come from AI that will then, for probably the next 24 months, differentiate the companies that lean into this concept of a faster but more personalized go-to-market. So like, let's take a tool that observes customer behavior and combines intent data and conversions and user data, and then maybe some industry knowledge, and help you craft outreach, help you craft your customer engagement metrics and such. That's going to be the next shift that I fully expect. We're starting to see it now with tools and such that will then drive this idea of like trust. I do think the next currency that we'll see in the market is trust, and an understanding of a deep understanding of the problem, a deep understanding of the solution, and not just perceived value, but ROI centric, metric driven value at every touch point that you have with your customer.
So I think that you're exactly right. I mean, the evolution is here and starting that, but trust and personalization. I've seen both sides where some personalization is really good and some is really fake. And so how do we achieve that genuine personalization where it does, maybe it is at scale, maybe it's automated, maybe it's not, but where it is perceived and we're building trust, we're not hurting trust through trying to be that personalized, give that personalized marketing message.
Can I swear? Can I swear in the show? Is that cool? You got to give a
Go
shit,
ahead.
right? Like you really got to care. I think at the end of the day, it was, and I'm a recovering salesperson myself. I lead salespeople now and support them and sell with them and support our customers. You have to care. And I don't think the industry required caring for the last 10 years. I think you could, personalize, if you will, and folks just saw that as perceived intimacy and like intimate interaction, and they went, "Oh, that feels good," and so intrinsically we just sort of moved forward. I think we are inherently questioning more. Is that like we all
Yes.
like those of us that do it every day that interact with people try and sell to me all day long now, right? I can read an
Yep.
AI written message in 10 seconds. I mean, it's right there in front of me every time. There's a difference between the way that, the robots, if you will, write and the way that people write. That's just natural. That will go away in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. That'll go away. You won't be able to tell the difference. I think it's going to be about using technology to the benefit of the customer. So personalization is less about feeling understood and more about being understood. And that comes from deeper understanding as a salesperson, deeper understanding as a product marketer, as a partner yourself, whoever whatever your role is that's customer facing, deeper understanding of the problem. Like you need to be a student of the problem. You need to fall in love with the problem. You need to really care about it, which is hard. Like if you're not passionate about, B2B MarTech and you're selling marketing technology, like that's going to suck for a while. You're going to, use your tools to try and fake it, but customers are going to see through it. And it needs to be about delivering value earlier too. So it's sort of my second point. I think personalization, I think those interactions become more important when you demonstrate knowledge by giving value. So it's almost like taking this inbound concept of like create content that helps your customer educate and pulling it into sales and calling it something different. Please don't call it inbound selling, but something around this idea that like, what if we could give value before we ask for the transaction? We could give recommendations, we could give feedback, we could give, analysis. And so actually New Breed, the firm that I work for, does a lot of that. We do these assessments and these deep integrated solutions before a customer transacts with us. Like we just give them all of this observative value and all of this recommendation based, content because we want to show them what we know we're doing, certainly, but also like they have earned that. They've asked for our help. Let's go and help them a bit as we get into this partnership together.
I think some companies are maybe a little bit scared of if I deliver all the value up front, then they won't need me.
Yeah.
And but there's so much more value.
If you do it right.
Just proving that, right. Proving that value and really delivering it. I don't think you can give too much early on.
I think there's just probably this like line of demarcation, the separation where you go from the free everything company and you don't ask for the sale to the like value first company that is, I think in some ways it's like proving to the customer that they're going to, work with the right person and the right organization. But it's also about, it's the trust piece we talked about. It's also about the fact that like your competitors are probably not doing that. They're gating stuff still. They're gating their, observations and such. Like, so I think it is a really important fundamental part of go-to-market.
It is. Yeah, so what do you think about gating content versus making it all open? Are there pieces that you should gate, and then there are other pieces that you shouldn't? Or what's your take?
I think the proprietary stuff you got to keep to yourselves. Like that's just the nature of business. If you're creating IP, then you're doing it right, and whether that is like through technology you build or through tools that you use or whatever it is that is your IP, you got to protect that. That should be, in my opinion, I don't know, I haven't really thought about this too deeply, like 10 to 15%, maybe 20% max of what you gate or reserve. I think the rest should be, it's a little bit proof of concept. It's a little bit like, give, get. It's a little bit of showing folks in the market that you know what you're doing. So I do think you should give most of it away, for free to keep it simple. I think you should ungate 80 or 90% of it, and then keep the parts that are special, your secret sauce, the things that make you to yourself. You can show your customer. I wouldn't give that to your customer. And that's the part you're talking about, Jeff, in terms of, being about like, let's give as much as we can. And then be clear that like by going a layer deeper, you do get the stuff for why, that is proprietary. And that's why you should want to work with us, because we can do more than just what we've shown you on the outside.
I think that's really smart because there's a lot of places, if you're gating it or you're not giving it away, somebody else may be.
Exactly.
Competitor probably is. And so, adding that value up front. But I really like that idea of there are things that are proprietary and those you want to keep a little bit closer. And those are for insiders.
Yep.
The secret sauce, that's for insiders, not necessarily just for everybody else.
And be transparent about it. Like you got to own that, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm the just radical transparency concept you hear sometimes from like HR departments and people ops teams that talk about that in terms of feedback or transparency of business health. I think it's transparency with the customer and the potential customer in that I'm going to give you as much as I can, but I'm not going to break this third wall. I'm not going to go and give you everything. I'm glad to once you're a customer, but again, like that is our differentiation, and we worked hard to develop
Yeah.
tools and processes and the things that make us exceptional at delivering value, and that's why you're paying us like to do that specifically.
Yeah. So in doing that and bringing customers on, building teams, you've done sales training as well. What makes a great salesperson? Are there specific things that you look for in that interview process that maybe red flags or things that this person is going to be really successful during the interview process?
Yeah, I recently. So I run revenue at New Breed here. I'm the director of revenue. So I've got a manager that works with me, and I've got two teams and a solutions architect. And so I do hire and I train and I develop, and I've got some incredible people that I get to work with every day. And through those experiences, I've identified, for us at least, these three core buckets that feed off of attributes that make somebody successful. So when I think about defining success for a salesperson in any organization, in ours, for example, I look at the attributes that make that person successful. I look at, a natural curiosity. I look for a figure it out factor. Are they looking for ways to learn and grow? Are they seeking out how to solve problems? Are they taking ownership of their destiny? Do they know their metrics and KPIs coming in? Can they speak to, I use a STAR interview method: situation, task, action, result. Can they tell actual stories about how they've been able to achieve the outcomes that are necessary to demonstrate those attributes? Like, we give them the attributes. Here's the 2 for this interview and the 3 for the next one. And I encourage them to read the framework and use their own experience to tell the stories to give us confidence that you can achieve those goals. That's one piece. The second piece for me is looking at some sort of real world application. So all new sales hires that come through our process, after they've made it through the attributes based interviews and those conversations, are then put through a mock discovery call with me. And some of my peers are there, they're off camera. And I'm not easy. Like, we give them a rubric, they know what they're getting graded on, and we're very transparent. But we have a challenging conversation, and I want them to stumble. I want them to have a hard time. How do they handle that adversity? How do they handle those no's and not just objection handling? Every sales leader loves to say, I test for that. But it's the challenge of like, how do they show up? Yes, how are they dressed? And yes, how are they presented? And how do they speak? But what happens when I say, no, I don't want to answer that question? Do they panic? Do they freak out? Do they pivot? Those are important characteristics. Resilience as a part of it, right? And then the 3 buckets that I mentioned, I define that very clearly as, for us, so our industry, our company, our need. The first is sales role mastery. You don't have to be the absolute best. I mean, I love to see like B Club, and I love to see, overattainment and such. That's important. Mastery of their craft. Like, do they ask questions about our sales process? Do they have examples of, projects that they've owned to make themselves better? Do they know their KPIs to be successful? Those are all important components. The second is industry knowledge. Do they understand the space that we work in? Have they sold to similar customers? Do they have examples of the interactions that we are having every day? Not because they need to bring a Rolodex, because I want them to come with the language. We have to speak the same language in terms of, our customer dialogue, and we have to understand industry trends. And that just helps them be more successful sooner. And then the third, because we are so closely aligned to HubSpot, because we're in the ecosystem and a top partner and working with their teams every day, I prefer that they've got either exposure to the HubSpot ecosystem and product, or having worked in and around it in some capacity. That helps them get accelerated value as well as they ramp in and start to win in the industry, in the company around the industry. They don't have to have all those buckets full. They can have a portion of each of them, but I can't have more than one of them empty. That's an important characteristic as they come in, because frankly, while I believe the tenacity and grit and hard work will get you there, I certainly did myself. I'm proud of it. It took me, 10 years to get to that first big sort of stage where I felt like I knew what I was doing. I don't want to set somebody up for a 10-year run. I want somebody, especially in sales, to come in and be, off ramp at month 5 as they are and already winning. I want somebody in month 2, understanding the job and feeling good about it, because it's really about empowerment towards their success.
Yes. So how did you go about developing those buckets? How did you think about that? So if somebody's listening and they're thinking, what am I looking for in my company? What was the thought process, or how did you go about putting that model together of, here are the 3 core pillars that we need for somebody to be successful?
I first thought about, who are we trying to work with? So you hear a lot about culture fit. You hear a lot of the buzzwords of, again, like objection handling and delivering value and whatever. I wanted to get to know people for who they were in our interview process.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to be, to be clear, I don't think about ownership and mastery of sales as needing to be a P Club every year rep. Like I certainly wasn't coming into HubSpot in my tenure there, but I became a top performing rep and I was, P Club every year and all that stuff. How that happened is how I reflect on how I'd like it to happen for somebody else, which is I knew my KPIs. I knew the opportunity that I had. I was reading books and I was watching YouTube videos, and ownership of the outcome, ownership of the work is what I'm really looking for. And I knew that after observing our most successful team members at New Breed, after observing successful team members at HubSpot, even the folks that I had prior to that, the startup that I ran, all of those different people had those core characteristics in common. And I knew that mastery, ownership was that core metric because of that, was that core framework. So that was sort of pillar one. Pillar two came from just my own experience and talking to other leaders in other businesses that had done this sort of next evolution in terms of, maturity of sales and maturity of servicing and such. And that was, you got to know the customer. And I said it before a couple minutes ago, but like really fall in love with the problem. I love go to market. Frankly, candidly, and this is probably the wrong thing to say on a recorded line, but if I could do this every day, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would love to just talk about this stuff. It's fascinating. I love learning about it because for me, industry and business is something that, I didn't really grow up with my family talking about and my friends talking about. And so it's this blue ocean of learning, and I love to learn. So when I think about the people that I'm trying to get into, to solve a problem for us and help us maximize an opportunity, those people should also care about it. So they have to be students of the industry and of the problem and really lean into the vertical that is, what we're doing, right? B2B SaaS, technology, manufacturing. We are providing solutions to them. We are helping customers. We are consulting in many ways, their strategy. That's an important thing. And you can't fake that. As much as I want to say you could, you can't. You can't fake that. So that's the second pillar. And the third pillar is the easiest of all to describe, which is, again, we're just a very close proximity to HubSpot. We have to be. We're a top solutions partner, and that matters. That means we understand the tools. We understand the go-to-market. We're aligned in terms of vertical. Somebody who doesn't have that, it is hard to ramp in unless you've got the first two buckets totally maxed out. I just hired somebody. They're totally exceptional. They had the first two buckets maxed out, and they have a learning attitude. They showed up. Actually, I told you about the discovery call role play in the interview process.
Yes.
They showed up with a deck. It's the first time someone had done this to present to us in the role play that we actually were slacking the group. It was my CRO and my head solutions architect and myself. We were slacking the background saying, did one of you give them this deck? Where did this come from? It was so close to our product. They had done so much research and they had the language and they had the story down. Super impressed. So there are people who can have that gap, if you will, in terms of not fulfilling a full bucket if they represent this, awesomeness that we found in this person I'm describing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think sales is one of the hardest roles to hire for. As every resume I've seen, never seen a resume where it said, I was in the bottom 25%, never made quota.
Yeah.
And for technical founders, I think it's even harder because they don't have the sales experience and the marketing. So having a framework like that and really thinking through exactly what you're looking for is really key. So I really appreciate you kind of bringing that forward.
Yeah.
And the framework and how you think about it.
I'm glad to. Yeah. If there are any technical founders that listen to this that want to talk about it, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. I'm glad to chat. I've worked with a bunch of technical founders in product founders, like the people that have an idea that hire a bunch of smart engineers and are the creatives too, the marketing leaders that start a company. Like those non-sales traditional, non-sales specific leaders are fascinating because they actually know the problem typically better than most. They know the solution better than most. That sales hire, whether it's their first leader or their first AE or whatever it is, should also love it that much. And for what it's worth, and we can get off this, but the startup I was at before HubSpot, so many, many years ago, I had been a general manager and built restaurants in Boston. This company was selling a product to restaurants and to service, industry-based companies, right, hotels, et cetera, hospitality. So I had some sales skills because I worked in a startup. I had industry deep knowledge. I mean, I was in the role. I was their persona. Like they were selling to me in many ways. And then I had this other component, which is I could overlap the two of those. I had technical experience and I had sales experience and I had industry. So different buckets, but it worked for them. And it made me successful. I sold more in the first 2 months than they had in the previous 2 years. And I remember the CEO saying to me vividly, he said, we let the SVP of sales go. And I was like, oh my gosh, he called me on a Sunday. You let him go? And he's like, yeah, great guy, not the right person for us. We're paying him a bunch of money. He's not getting the results. You get to keep your job for 90 days. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? He said, keep doing what you're doing and prove that you're the right guy. And I remember being totally intimidated by that. And then
Wow.
realizing over those next 90 days, no, I know deeply the solution. Like I understand what we're trying to solve for. I mean, the actual problem aside, it's sort of irrelevant to our topic here. And because of that, I could relate to my buyer. So when you think about your first
Yeah.
hires, right, and you're on, especially in your early stage companies and your first, call it 2 to 4 years, they got to care. They got to be jack of all trades. They got to be flexible. Like we can talk about that all day. They have to deeply
Sure.
care about your customer and about your problem.
Oh, that's big. And that second bucket is where I'm at. I'm not technical in my background. It is marketing and coming up with the ideas and then finding the technical people to make those reality. So it's a very different dynamic.
Yeah,
and understanding that. But I love that, really falling in love with the problem and understanding it deeply of what we're trying to solve, and then being able to communicate that and pass it on. But that relational factor, just like you with the restaurants, you'd been in that world, you knew the pain.
Yep. Yeah, and I could relate to it myself, and I could tell the stories that mattered, and the stories are ultimately what I think in many ways make us believe it. So if you think about being a leader in any of these organizations, the stories we tell ourselves are the ones that sort of carry us through to the next stage of growth, and our customers hear those stories and relate to them and care about them. And so I had, I could tell the war stories of opening a restaurant in Boston and in 2000, what was it, 11, 12, like ish, when it was like, the thing you didn't do. You didn't open a restaurant in the part of the city we did. And we were very successful, and it was an incredible journey. That was related to the problem that we ended up solving. And so I could tell that story and to leaders in, I took that story and sold to one of the largest fast casual chains in the Southeast, West, I don't know, in the South, like 2,000 locations, huge brand. And then the COO was like, you get this. It's like, I do get this. This is why we're trying to solve this problem. And that matters, right? Your first sales hire should be able to see your persona intimately like that.
Oh, that's great. Well, lots of different ways to go to market. Partnerships we talked about. There's other ways, outbound. We talked a little bit about inbound, account-based marketing. Where do you see the market going, or what have you seen working really, really well?
I think it's if I observe it very clearly, it's three things. You need to have great marketing for brand awareness and for education purposes. You need to have highly, highly skilled salespeople. And so I know there's a lot of folks who hear that and go, yeah, the sellers can sell. It's not what I said. I said skilled. They need to be deeply knowledgeable about your problem, all the stuff that I've exclaimed here. They need to be integrated into your business. They need to understand what they're doing, et cetera. And I think the third piece is being very intentional around not just awareness and consideration, if you will, but the decision process. You need to align to how your buyers buy. So the evolution in the way that folks are going to market that I'm seeing in particular with our customers and with conversations in the industry is that marketing is more important than ever, that selling is more valuable than ever, that partnerships are table stakes as you get sort of integrated into the ecosystem that is around your customer, and you build this near-bound motion and you leverage that opportunity. And that you really lean into, how do we do this effectively over and over again? How do we continue to repeat the answer to that solution? And that comes from that deep-seated knowledge of the problem itself, and leaning into this idea that like value is not singular, right? We're not just doing this thing to transact. We're continuing to iterate, to grow. It's a true partnership methodology to the way that you deliver to customers. And so I think the go-to-market motions are the same. They're just more mature. I think they're more deeply, and I see it like more deeply integrated into the scrutiny that comes with selling in today's environment, and that buyers are more discerning and they're more critical. And so at the end of the day, the biggest opportunity you have, in my opinion, right, in my experience as of late, is to think about your sales process, think about the way that your buyers buy, interview them, interview your most recent customers and your longest customers, and make sure those two things align, because I bet they don't. 9.5 out of 10 times, most companies sell the way they want to sell, and customers buy differently. And they try on both sides to fit those two processes together, and it sucks. It's hard. And so that's my advice. Like, be intentional and be very clear on how to align the way that you sell so your buyers can be very effective and efficient in getting what they need because they're going to say yes to you faster and they're going to say yes to you more when you deeply understand them and then you sell to the way that they want to buy.
Such great advice. You're in a position where you really see a lot of different companies. I mean, being in the agency, I mean, it's like almost, you're seeing all of this activity going on and what's working. Over the last, last year and a half, 2 years, talk of recession, inflation, those kinds of things, and growth at all cost was now a bad idea.
Yeah.
And, fundamentals matter, which I think that's always true. But companies are coming out of that. Maybe the recession talk is dying down a little bit, starting to grow again. What are you seeing that is working as we're emerging, and things that are working to help those companies really get that growth wheel turning again?
I think it's more than anything leaning into this idea that personalization matters, but real personalization. So we used to always talk about, when I ran sales training, we talk about active listening as a core skill for a good sales rep.
Right.
And I used to always use this. This is the statement I would make. I'd say active listening is the act of listening, but with the intent to understand. And the room would always go, oh, like you just did. Right? Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I don't know where I either came up
I
with
like
it or
that.
read it or whatever it was, right? But I think about that a lot now, and that is very specifically the way that companies are going to win going into 24 H2 and into 25. When they listen to the market as marketers, when they listen to the customer as CS leaders, when they listen to the buyer as sales folks. If you think about what has evolved in terms of, we just said it, right? The scrutiny and the attention to detail and the cost consciousness and everything else. There's more people involved in a buying cycle, which means you've got more influencers and decision makers. And all that aside, if you just listen, if you just continue to listen, right? Not shut our ears off, which takes effort. It's hard. It's tiring. If we do a better job at that, that's what I'm seeing our customers. That's what I'm hearing in the industry. We're doing it. Like, if we are better at actually having a real conversation, I think you see accelerated, buying cycles. I think you see more customer acquisition. I think you see happier customers, because we're not selling anymore. We're listening and we're prescribing and we're solving. And at the end of that process, if both parties go, heck yeah, this makes sense, like we both get it, then sign the dotted line. Let's move forward. But we should be clear earlier on if that's not the case, which is why your marketing is important. Do you understand your buyer? Put that message out there, communicate it. Your selling is important. Do you understand the problem? Can you articulate it and provide recommendations like we were talking about, and forward value in that process? And then once they transact and say yes, now you got to deliver on that. And if you're doing a great job of aligning to how your buyers want to buy and consistently articulating how you'll actually do that work and then delivering on that work, that's step one. Step two is listening to that customer, because now they're working with you. What are they telling you? What's the feedback? Have an open dialogue back and forth. For us, we're fortunate to partner with organizations truly. So I'm not just selling them something, we're partnering, because we can't do this work without their input. And so, frankly, candidly, like the other day, I have an example. We were working with an interesting buyer. He had a very large personality. He was a COO at a tech company and was a bit bold. And I remember my rep saying to me, can you listen to this call? Like, I want to make sure that I'm not kooky. Like, this guy's either really mean and shitty, or he's exceptional at what he does and wants us to do better in our sales process. And it was the latter. I remember talking to her about it and saying, like, you're right. What you said to him was correct. Your recommendation was right. He doesn't have to love it, but your recommendation was important at that stage of the call. Sure enough, the next morning he emailed. He said, I thought about what you said. I want to go deeply into that. Like, can you bring your team? Right? So what's fascinating about that is, like, we had a chance to push this guy off and DQ him, but we gave him some recommendations and let him sit on it. And sure enough, he came back and said, you were the only agency or only salesperson of the three that I'm talking to that actually pushed on me. Thank you. So I think at the end of the day, it's about understanding and listening more than ever.
I think that's so important, especially in the sales conversation of just what you said. I think that's absolute gold, is listening to understand, not listening to rebut or thinking about, here's how I'm going to defeat this objection or whatever's being said, but really listening to understand. I mean, hearing the conversation, what's going on, understanding that, what's the question behind the question.
Exactly.
Even what's underneath that.
Yeah, exactly. It's the level 2, 3 stuff. If you think about old school sales training, like, it's getting to the basis of what actually is driving that question or that behavior. You get that right, you really tap into what the customer cares about, and then you can actually affect change.
Yes, and that's ultimately what we want to do anyway.
That's the goal.
That's the point of sales, is to have that impact, to have that change, to take them from where they are to where they want to go.
Change the outcome. That's our whole model,
Yeah.
model and methodology here,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So as you're working with your teams, how do you foster innovation and encourage them to think outside of the box in rapidly evolving industry, especially when we're talking about digital marketing and go-to-market strategy and AI? Things are moving so fast. How do you encourage them to keep up and really think creatively?
Be a student of the problem. We said that earlier on. Be intentional around encouraging figure it out factor. When folks say things like, can I? My response is, should you? Okay, it's not about can I or can't I, right? Like I want you to be creative thinking and such. I open up our team meetings constantly with a question in the beginning, in the middle, and the end of something that's very open-ended, very abstract. I saw this article the other day. What do you all think about it? I encourage creative thinking in that sense. And then at the sort of other end of that, we have to be very intentional. So I do think, because AI came up earlier, I'll say it again, that trends, I'm going to use that word specifically, like AI, are important. This will be the next catalyst to growth in technology. We all know that, writing's on the wall. How we harness that power is going to be important. So I remember early on, even just months ago, folks saying, AI is going to replace people. I'm not so sure about that. I think AI will augment the best. I think AI will uplift the mediums. I do think AI will displace your less impactful employees and your less impactful processes. And so maybe it makes you more scalable to lean into the best of the best, or make your top performers more successful, et cetera. So I think if I were to sort of synthesize your question, when you look at the accelerated growth stage that we're about to enter, people need to care about that, which means companies will become more lean because they'll have less of the folks that are just kind of hanging on. It means value will be in the forefront of every conversation. It means education and deep knowledge will be important. All these tools can help foster that. The trend I expect to see as a result is that people will want to have more open dialogues. So a culture of openness, of feedback, of conversation, of education. It's what we do here, and it's been helpful because I learn I might have a big title, senior director of revenue. I'm no different than the person that sits next to me. The brand new SDR started yesterday. The brand new product marketer who started yesterday, because we are a product of the environment that we are a part of. And they were somewhere before this, whether that is college or 20 years of experience. And so a culture of learning, a culture of openness and humility and humanity is what I lean into as a way to foster that growth and that continued development and the innovation that's important in today's market.
Love that. Well, where can people learn more about you and about New Breed Revenue online?
Newbreedrevenue.com is our website. I think that's a great place to start off. We're obviously on all the socials. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I try and be. I've got my own podcast. I talk to partnership leaders and go-to-market leaders and have really tactical discussions. So we've got a bunch of media that the business puts out, that I put out, that's educational, it's supportive. But frankly, shoot me a note. I'll spend 10 minutes with anybody. I love conversation and getting to know folks. And, I'm fortunate to have a lot of connections on LinkedIn I've developed over 20 years in business that I learn from every day. So if you want to come educate me, do it. If you want to come learn from me, let's do it. And, ultimately we can all get better. It's going to be through LinkedIn. It's going to be through newbreedrevenue.com. And, I'm glad to help, frankly, and genuinely.
Outstanding. We'll make sure and link all of that in the show notes and a link to your podcast as well. Tell us about that as we wrap up.
It's called Outcomes. It's conversations with folks that have been there, done the work, and have a story to tell about it. I keep it tight. It's 20 minutes or less. It's tactical. And the idea is that you can listen to it, on the way to soccer, head to the grocery store, on your way home from work, and take something away from it that you can apply to your job and get better. I like to learn. So for me, it's educational and I get to learn. And my intent was to share that with folks after learning that, some of the things I was educating myself on could help others.
Outstanding. Well, Barrett, thanks for being on SaaS Fuel. Great conversation.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks again, Barrett, for coming on the show and sharing your insights and resources. You can learn more about Barrett and New Breed Revenue at newbreedrevenue.com. And be sure to check him out on social as well. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And check us out on YouTube as well. Full episodes, video shorts, training, tips, outtakes, geese quacking in the background, and quite a bit more. Leaders are sharers, so help someone expand their horizons this week about partnerships by sharing this episode. Everyone who shares gets a synergy scanner. It's a digital tool that analyzes potential partnerships for compatibility and ensures your next collaboration not just productive, but also a great fit. Hey, if it was only that easy, right? The Partner Network Navigator actually does make it easy, so hit me up if that sounds interesting. Join us next Tuesday, where our founder is James Lawrence, founder and CEO of Happy Companies. He'll talk about how AI and behavioral science can enhance organizational culture, communication, and manager effectiveness at scale. And next week on our SaaS Fuel Expert Series, we have Andrew Sykes from Habits at Work. Super excited about talking with Andrew. We'll be talking about transitioning from founder-led sales to a sales team, plus the Platinum 5 Minutes and how that leads to the Golden Hour. I will see you next time, and as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/saasfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.